Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here because, well, today we are untangling a seriously fascinating legal mystery. We're looking at a recent, highly detailed report from the National Law University in Delhi that exposes what I like to call the paper tiger paradox of India's environmental laws. It's a deep dive into organized illegal mining and, surprisingly, a whole new frontier: greenwashing. You know, India actually has some of the fiercest environmental laws in the world written right there in its books. I mean, they look genuinely terrifying on paper. Yet, when it comes to actual criminal convictions for large-scale environmental destruction, the tiger suddenly loses all its teeth. So why is that? How do massive corporate syndicates walk away from decades of illegal mining with literally zero jail time? Well, we're going to break down the statutes, the loopholes, and the brilliant new strategies being used to fight back.
Okay, let's dive into this with a number that perfectly sets the stage: 0. Under the Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Act, or MMDR Act, amendments in 2015 specifically allowed for the creation of special courts. The goal was pretty straightforward, right?
Section 1. Strict laws, weak enforcement.
There's just this incredibly massive gap between these strict penalties written into the law and the reality of what actually happens on the ground in India's forests, rivers, and coastlines. And to understand the true gravity of this enforcement gap, we just need to look at how the highest court in the land views the situation. In the 2017 Common Cause case, which dealt with rampant, totally unchecked sand mining, the Supreme Court of India literally described the situation as a scandal of enormous proportions. The court recognized that organized illegal mining wasn't just some minor administrative violation. It was a full-blown systemic crisis involving collusion, huge environmental degradation, and the stripping away of natural resources. Yet despite this high-level recognition from the Supreme Court, getting convictions remained incredibly elusive.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just how severe the penalties actually are on paper. Under Section 21 of the MMDR Act, unauthorized mining can get you up to 5 whole years in jail, plus massive fines of 5 lakh rupees per hectare. The Environment Protection Act and the Water Act also carry minimum jail terms ranging from 1.5 to 5 or even 6 years. These are non-bailable, cognizable offenses. The legislative intent here is clearly highly punitive. The laws are built to punish and deter. So if the penalties are this harsh, you've got to ask yourself, why aren't the prisons filled with environmental offenders? Section 2. Loopholes and procedural hurdles. That paradox leads us directly into the mechanics of the legal system itself, which, quite frankly, often becomes the best defense for an environmental criminal. Here's one of the biggest procedural roadblocks. Under Section 22 of the MMDR Act and Section 19 of the Environment Protection Act, there's a strict cognizance limitation. What does that actually mean for us? It means a regular citizen, a journalist, or an environmental NGO cannot simply walk into a police station and file a First Information Report, or FIR, against a massive mining corporation. No way. Only authorized government officials can trigger these criminal trials. This completely restricts proactive prosecution and means enforcement is entirely dependent on state agencies, which, let's be honest, may seriously lack the resources or the political will to go after the big guys. Furthermore, even when authorities do step up and take action, many of these environmental pollution crimes end up being treated as compoundable offenses. Essentially, this is an offense that can be settled out of court by just paying a fine. Instead of a criminal conviction and actual jail time, companies just pay the prescribed fines under the Criminal Procedure Code and walk away scot-free. For a multi-million-dollar mining syndicate, these fines are often just written off as the cost of doing business. The criminal deterrence entirely disappears. It's just a slap on the wrist. Section 3. The Corporate Shield. But what happens when a case actually makes it toward trial? And this brilliantly illustrates the legal ping-pong that takes place in court. On one hand, the law seems incredibly tough. Under the EPA and MDR Acts, the company and its persons in charge are deemed strictly liable. You break the rules, you're deemed guilty, pretty cut and dry, right? But look at the flip side. The law provides this massive escape hatch called the due diligence defense. A corporate director or manager is completely exempt from punishment if they can simply prove they had no personal knowledge of the offense or that they exercised all due diligence to prevent it. In practice, proving that a specific executive sitting in a plush boardroom hundreds of miles away had direct knowledge of illegal dumping or mining in a remote forest is just incredibly difficult.
We can see exactly how this plays out in the real world through the famous Goa Foundation case. Here, the Supreme Court uncovered a massive scandal where corporate leaseholders had been illegally mining for about 5 straight years, raking in enormous profits. The court literally called their past actions a sordid chapter. They canceled the leases, sure, but the crucial point? The principal promoters, the actual executives who profited, served absolutely zero jail time. The system punished the resources by halting the mining, but completely failed to criminally punish the people responsible.
Section 4, criminalizing greenwashing. So if traditional environmental laws are hampered by procedural hurdles and corporate shields, how on earth does the state fight back? Let's move to Nairobi and see how this builds across the timeline. Over the past 50 years, from the Water Act in 1974 to the EPA in 1986, right up through the MMDR amendments in 2015, India tried to use standard environmental statutes to fight pollution. But right at the bottom, we see a massive shift in strategy. In October 2024, the Central Consumer Protection Authority, or CCPA, issued formal greenwashing guidelines. They aren't using environmental law here, they're actually using consumer protection law. Let's break down exactly how the 2024 CCPA guidelines define this, because it's a real game changer. Greenwashing is any false, deceptive, or unsubstantiated claim which misleads by exaggerating or concealing environmental benefits. This means a corporation can no longer just casually slap vague words like eco-friendly or carbon neutral on a product or a glossy corporate report without hard, verifiable certification to back it up. If they do, they are committing a crime. And let me tell you, the penalties under the Consumer Protection Act are no joke. For a first offense of making misleading environmental claims, executives face up to 2 years in jail or a 10 lakh rupee fine. But look at what happens for repeat offenders. The punishment jumps to up to 5 years in jail or a massive 50 lakh rupee fine. Consumer interest groups are pointing out that this finally creates a powerful, tangible deterrent that hits corporations where it hurts.
So what does this all mean? It begs a really interesting question. Why use consumer law to fight an environmental crime? Why not just fix and use the EPA? The answer is an absolute plot twist. As we learned earlier, state environmental crimes are incredibly hard to prosecute because of those rigid rules. Citizens can't file complaints, and executives just hide behind the due diligence loophole. But consumer fraud laws, they bypass that broken system entirely. By treating a false green claim as an unfair trade practice or fraud, it opens a brand new, highly effective door to pursue penal sanctions against corporate polluters who lie about their practices. It's actually a brilliant workaround.
Section 5, fixing the system. Greenwashing laws are a great start, for sure, but we still have to fix the core issues of illegal mining and pollution. So the crucial point is, we actually have a clear blueprint to close these loopholes. First, the state governments must finally establish those special courts for mining to guarantee speedy trials. We can't have cases dragging on for decades. Second, we need harmonization. When the National Green Tribunal cancels a lease for civil violations, it should automatically trigger a criminal probe by police. Third, we've got to make electronic transport passes mandatory for minerals, so any missing data is instant, undeniable evidence of theft. Fourth, lawmakers need to strictly limit or eliminate that due diligence loophole so corporate officers can't just claim ignorance. And finally, we absolutely must protect the brave whistleblowers who expose these organized mining syndicates and corporate greenwashing in the first place. We've seen today that India possesses a vast arsenal of laws capable of stopping environmental destruction, from severe mining penalties to innovative new consumer fraud tactics against greenwashing. The laws exist, but a law is really only as strong as its enforcement. Without specialized courts, empowered agencies, and the closing of corporate loopholes, these laws remain a paper tiger. So the ultimate question we are left with is this: will India's institutions finally commit the political and institutional will necessary to protect its forests, rivers, and coasts? It's a high-stakes question for the very future of the environment, and one we are going to be watching closely. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep asking the tough questions and keep learning.